if I told you that you could travel anywhere in the world from the comfort of your living room? You could watch the northern lights dance over the Arctic Circle, watch a sunset over the Eiffel Tower, or watch in awe as the world's leading brain surgeon performed a revolutionary new procedure. This, my friends, is not science fiction. It's possible today with virtual reality. As a viewer, virtual reality allows you to become a better world citizen by forming connections with people that you've never met before, living all the way across the world. As a creator, virtual reality allows you to create stories that promote empathy between people and are limited only by your own imagination. Imagine telling the story to a Nordic Swede about how a family in South Sudan was fighting famine. This is possible with virtual reality. And the best part about it is, it's completely possible with what you have in your pocket right now. But before you pull out your phone and see if this is possible, follow me and we'll explore how virtual reality can create a better world. Our story begins with the Global Bright Light Foundation, an organization that I've had the honor of leading for the past 2 years. Global Bright Light brings practical, affordable solar energy solutions to communities in Latin America that do not have access to electricity. Right now, around us, there are over 25 to 35 million people who do not have basic energy services. This means that when the sun sets, their life grinds to a halt. They have to rely on candles, kerosene, and batteries to light and power their lives. And these fuels are expensive and dirty and dangerous. We at Global Bright Light imagine a future in which everyone has access to sustainable, clean energy. And to share this vision with the world, last year we partnered with Facebook and Oculus to create a virtual reality film that told the story of energy poverty by looking at the lives of two families, one with solar energy and one without. So where our story really begins is with this little girl. I met her 2 years ago in a village in northern Guatemala. Her name is Maria. Maria's family did not have access to electricity until Global Bright Light partnered with their community to get them solar power. This solar power replaced the candles and kerosene that her family was spending a quarter of their income on every month. It allowed their children to study more hours, made the home safer because it was free from the risk of a candle tipping over and starting a fire, and saved their family hundreds and hundreds of dollars over its lifetime. Now, while that may sound impressive, what was really amazing to me about Maria was that she'd grown up her entire life with the expectation of solar energy. And I thought to myself, what if all children in the world thought this way and had the expectation for a better, cleaner future? What would the world look like if that were the case? So I got back to the US and I tried to tell Maria's story, but as a small nonprofit, we were limited in the channels in which we could tell her story. We had a website, a limited social media presence, and communicated primarily with our supporters through direct mail. So these aren't really innovative ways of communicating, and I was looking for an alternative. I'd read about how some other nonprofits were using virtual reality to create empathy and motivate people to take action on issues like the one we were working on. But it hadn't quite clicked how we could do this ourselves. So as sometimes happens in life, the answer came from an unexpected place. I was at an after-hours event at my office and met two guys who had recently bought a virtual reality camera. They were really excited to use it, but had no one to partner with. And I was really excited to explore virtual reality, but had no idea how to do it. So we got together and decided to go to Guatemala and make 3 short films. So we learned a lot from our first experience with virtual reality, and this is actually not the camera we used on that project, but it gives you a good sense of what a virtual reality camera looks like. You have cameras around a sphere that shoot in all directions, and this leads to some very interesting scenarios as a director. In traditional film, The director sits behind the camera and directs from there. In virtual reality, the camera shoots in all directions, so there's no way to hide, which means that as we were directing the action, we had to run out of the room and hide from the camera's view in order to get the shots that we wanted. So sometimes we'd hide behind bushes, cars, buildings, walls, and even each other to avoid getting caught on camera. And it was a very unique experience for sure. Secondly, we learned not to push the limits of the technology. We really wanted to get a shot coming behind us from the air, following our cars down a road. And we thought this would provide a really cool sort of visual for the viewer. They felt like they were flying behind us. But it was a little technically challenging. We decided to risk it, and on the first day of our project, we strapped our only VR camera to the bottom of this drone and sent it up in the air. And let's watch what happened when we did that. So about 5 minutes into our filming, we thought we'd ruin the whole thing. We thought the camera was broken, the drone was broken, and it was all over, but thankfully that wasn't the case. The third and most important thing we learned was that VR works best when you tell personal stories and not when you try and promote a brand or a service. So imagine you're in a VR experience, walking through a remote jungle, and all of a sudden you start seeing the logo of the conservation group that created the film, and snap, you're back in the reality you were in before you put on the headset. Our first VR films fell victim to this trap by featuring our staff and our logo very prominently. And so we missed the opportunity to tell an emotionally moving story. So flash forward a couple months later, I'd been showing the film to people, and a friend of mine sent a link to a program called VR for Good. This was a program hosted by Facebook and Oculus that brought together nonprofits and filmmakers and funded them to go out in the world and tell stories of social change. We flew to Facebook's headquarters in California and started thinking about what we wanted to tell this story about. And so what we landed on was going to a remote community in Guatemala and filming the story of two families in the same community. One family with solar power and one without. And so this woman behind me, her name is Ilse Lopez. And Ilse Lopez is a very important member of the community of Tactique. She's a community leader, she's a matriarch of her family, and she's a great storyteller. So we selected Ilse's family with her grandson Anderson, and then found another family in the same community who did not have access to electricity. And so we decided we would tell a film about their story. So things got off to a great start. We were doing a lot of filming, long days, it was very exciting. And it sort of started falling apart when the most important part of the filming was happening, which was getting Ilse's story. So this is an actual shot of us trying to record her story. And the problem was obviously the setup. So you can see she's sitting on one side of the room, and everyone's sitting across from her, and you have one person translating our Australian director while other people look on. And the problem was that this was not conducive to her telling a natural story. It felt like she was just answering a series of questions. And what we wanted was for Ilse to tell her story from the heart and then build a film around that. So to solve this problem, we moved the interview from the village to a neutral location, and we also switched from an interview to a conversational format, something more natural. And when we did that, everything fell into place. Ilse's story became the narrative around which we built an emotionally moving film, and we called it Amor de Abuela in her honor. So filming Amor de Abuela, we learned a lot, just as we had in our first experience, but we learned even more when we started sharing it with the world. The first thing we learned is that virtual reality can connect people to issues in a way never before possible. So if you look at traditional filmmaking, you have a screen between the viewer and the subject of the film. In virtual reality, that disappears. There's no barrier between the viewer and the subject, which means the viewer becomes part of the story. And this is truly revolutionary. It means that you can actually create empathy between people who are a world away from each other. The second thing we learned is that virtual reality is a way to challenge our worldviews. So in this age of the 24-hour news cycle, Facebook feeds, Twitter posts like are going around right now, we get bombarded with information that we can't simply cope with. So every day we have to apply our worldview and our beliefs to screen out information, or else we would simply go crazy. There's just too much to learn, too much to know, too much to see. So what we learned is that by disconnecting someone from the physical world as well as the digital world, they can truly concentrate on something and actually challenge their perceptions of the world. And this means that we can actually change people's views of the world and their beliefs. And if you think about it, you might see these headsets and all this technology and say, hey, there's no way you can scale this, there's no way you can share this. But I'd challenge you to say, try and find anyone to watch anything for 5 minutes with their undivided attention. And that's what virtual reality does. So at this point in the story, you may be wondering, I thought this guy was going to talk about how virtual reality can help with social issues. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to give you 3 examples of how that works. The first is about a film called Clouds over Sidra. So in 2006, the UN created a film examining the life of a young girl in a refugee camp in Syria. And they wanted to not just create a beautiful film, but also have this film motivate people to take some sort of action. And so what they did is they created a project called the Sidra Project and showed the film at 95 events around Canada to over 7,000 people. And the results of the survey that they conducted is up here. And what's truly amazing about this is almost everyone who saw the film felt more connected to the refugees depicted in it, even though they were in Canada and Syria was literally across the globe. Most people also felt motivated to take action after seeing the film. And most people also agreed that the film would be a recruitment tool that would be an effective way of getting others to support Syrian refugee efforts. So UNICEF, which is another massive organization, works all around the globe, saw value in virtual reality too, and they created their own film. So the way they used it is they have street teams that go out, and they're the people who stop you on the street and say, hey, would you like to donate to UNICEF? But instead of just saying, hey, would you like to donate, they actually put people in virtual reality. And what happened was amazing. They saw their donation rates increase twofold. So twice as many people donated to UNICEF after they were able to see the film. And that's pretty impressive. And last but not least, Global Brightlight, we've had the honor of showing Amor de Abuela at the Sundance, South by Southwest, and Cannes Film Festivals this year. And what we took away from our experience through interviewing people was much the same as the Sidra Project. Almost everyone we interviewed felt connected to an issue that most didn't even know existed. So I want to leave you with this and ask you a question. What would you create a virtual reality film about? And it doesn't have to be about social issues. It doesn't have to be grand. You could share your Christmas in Bogota with a relative living in Tokyo. You could create films for friends, family, colleagues, and customers that tell truly emotional and moving stories. And you can use these to create an impact in the world. You may also be surprised who you end up connecting with. Thank you.